Hey team, and welcome back to the channel, and welcome to another in the series of videos that I'm doing where we're building an arsenal. What I'm doing, as you can see I'm a little off center here, is I am putting all the bowling balls for a particular brand up on a chart. I am comparing them all by oil volume that they're built to handle and by sharpness and smoothness of their motion shape. I'm compiling this chart for each brand to let you guys know as consumers what the balls do relative to one another, and what I've done is I've put an entire year's worth of bowling balls for a particular brand on the charts. This time we're focusing on Brunswick. You may have noticed that I have all of the July releases for Hammer, Ebonite, and Deviate out in their own separate videos, so if you're interested in arsenal building with any of those bowling balls, please take a look at those videos on YouTube or Facebook, Bowling Buckosh. And what we'll do right now is we'll talk just a brief moment about the new bowling balls that Brunswick is introducing for Bowl Expo. They are the Brunswick Combat and the Infinity Quest. The Combat is a new nameplate. You might remember the Combat Zone series. There is no relation to that series, but bringing back a pretty cool name for a new nameplate for a really cool and new bowling ball inside and out. This one is a brand new core, and although it's using the HK22 cover base, it is a brand new additive package in that cover as well. So we'll get to all the details on that in a minute. The other one is the Infinity Quest. Now this is of course the return of the Infinity nameplate. This will be the third time, and this is the solid. Uniquely though, this is a 3-color shiny solid, something that you don't see very often, although it is making a little bit of a resurgence here as of late with the other brands. But shiny solid that's going to be in the middle of the bag, and it's going to be a little sharper than you might expect. So we'll talk about all the details and the nuances of ball motion and the difference between these two asymmetrical balls. Even though they're both shiny asims, they look like they're close on the chart, but the nuances in ball motion make them fit different parts of the bag at different times for different reasons. And I will talk to you all about that in one moment. But first we're going to talk a little bit about this chart. When you're building your arsenal, you don't want too much overlap, so you're going to take a look at this chart and you're going to select various balls from various locations to make sure that all of your equipment complements each other. It's my recommendation that you guys use 2 3-ball totes. And the reason is, well, you've got 2 arms, so that's 1 tote per each arm. And it's easy to drop your favorites into 1 3-ball tote for the house shot China, and then when you're traveling to local tournaments, regional tournaments, and conditions that you might not be too sure what you're bowling on, then it's easy to bring all 6 of them with you and you have all of your bases covered. Now, in order to do that and not have too much overlap or too much confusion about what balls to select for what conditions, we have a little format that we have been using. You are going to select 6 bowling balls. That is why it's called a 6-ball arsenal. We're going to select from the heavy oil, the medium oil, and the light oil category. We're going to pick 2 from heavy, 2 from medium, and 2 from light. And for each of those categories with the 2 bowling balls, you want to make sure there are separate motions too. So you're going to do 1 sharp and 1 smooth from each of those 3 categories for making a total of 6 bowling balls. That's easy enough. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to pop the catalog for Brunswick up on the screen right now. These are all the bowling balls for Brunswick that have been released within the last year. Now, just a couple disclaimers for you guys. First of all, these charts are my opinion. It's not the opinion of Brunswick or the marketing team or anything like that. Although, for the most part, we do a pretty good job. The R&D team, the marketing team, make good communication about where the balls fit and marketing them rightly so. So my personal opinion does not vary very much from the marketing. Most of the time, there are maybe some slight nuances about how sharp is the sharp ball, how smooth is the smooth ball, but in terms of where they fit and where they belong, my opinion generally agrees, and I will tell you differently. I'm not afraid to tell you differently if I think that is the case. Disclaimer number 2, I didn't spend 1,000 hours nudging them to the nth degree to make sure that each ball is perfectly like 3 millimeters away because it hooks 3 boards more or anything like that. They're just in their basic shape categories, for the most part in a box or on a line between boxes, and if there was some overlap, then I nudged them around to make sure they made sense relative to the other balls around them. Some of them aren't perfectly on a line, but these are just their general categories at their box finish with a standard layout. So all else being equal, this is where they would fit relative to one another. Asterisk results may vary, right? And my final disclaimer is that this is just 1 year of bowling balls in the Brunswick lineup. So this is from Bowl Expo 2024 all the way up until just before Bowl Expo 2025, and we'll pop the new ones on the chart in just 1 second. But before we do that, just to be clear, these balls are not necessarily just Brunswick's entire lineup. It's just 1 year's worth of bowling balls. So the lineup is a little different because some balls get discontinued before a year is up. Some balls that are really good sellers will maintain for longer than a year in the lineup. And of course, you have your staples like your twists and rhinos that will pop up for multiple years. I don't have all of those on the chart. I just have the last year's worth. Okay, and since we're talking about the last year's worth of bowling balls, let's take a lap around this chart and hit some highlights. The flagship has been the Mesmerize and Vaporize series, and of course the Hypnotize is part of that. Uniquely, that series has two different cores going on at the same time. So the Vaporize has that original Danger Zone asymmetrical light bulb core, whereas the Hypnotize has that new triliptic asymmetrical core, as well as the Mesmerize. And those cores have been really good at helping the continuation, despite the fact that these are big, chuggy asymmetrical balls with strong sanded cover stocks. So the Hypnotize, the hybrid of the bunch, is actually kind of right now the front runner for ball of the year for Brunswick for me. That one has just been so versatile. You can see it fits squarely in the motion category. It's not super sharp, but it's not super smooth either, and that makes it really versatile across a wide variety of fresh patterns. And then after those three balls, you step down into the symmetrical options, and Brunswick has a really wide array of offerings in the symmetrical lineup. You've got your ultra smooth Ethos Solid that is relatively new to the lineup, and a sanded Ethos Hybrid that is just one step cleaner and sharper while still being in the continuous range of ball motion. The Crown Victory it did gain a little bit of traction in terms of popularity, but I still think it's being undersold. This is one of, if not our best angular symmetrical balls on the market across any of our brands. This one, when you get enough friction for it to start up, then it's just making the shape that bowlers like to see. It's sharp without being uncontrollable, and it makes enough back-end angle to carry really well. So a very popular ball that I believe actually should be more popular than it is. If you need a step smoother and cleaner option, then the Rhino Pro is still kicking around, that ivory version there. And of course, we have a fun mix of entry-level options in your Rhino series that also double as clean and smooth options for real burn conditions. I've noticed that lefties actually gravitate toward the Rhino series because it's a combination of length and smooth that left-handers can trap on the outside of the track area a little better than right-handers can. Not the best balls for sending it and bending it, but for lefties who want to keep it in front of them, the Rhino series, and I'm talking about the entry-level Rhino series with the little light bulb core, has actually been doing rather well for them. So some utility there, but also of course amazing beginner balls or twists as a really budget-friendly option that offers the least amount of differential. So there's a lot on this chart. One of the most well-rounded of all of our brands. Okay, now I'm going to flip a magic switch here, and you'll notice that the Mesmerize and the Vaporize last year's Bowl Expo releases have gone away, and in their place, two new bowling balls, the Combat and the Infinity Quest. Now, admittedly, this is crowding the sharp side of the ball motion category just a little bit, but I'm going to give you just a little more explanation to hopefully clear up the nuanced differences between the Combat, the Infinity Quest. Obviously, there are drawbacks to just having a 2D chart with two axes being oil volume and sharpness and smoothness. I mean, it really doesn't account for length that well, and there are plenty of nuances in ball motion. The differences between asymmetrical and symmetrical ball motion, or high asymmetry and low asymmetry, as is in the case of these two new balls, those nuances don't show up that well in this 2D chart. But before we get into the ball motion itself, let's talk a little bit about these core cover combinations, because we've got some newness coming up here, and I'm not going to do a video on the cores independently. So if you're just interested in the chart, go ahead and skip this section. I've got the chapters down below in the description, and they're in the little bar thingy if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're interested in checking out the new core, then stick with me right here, because we're going to pop up this Combat core. You'll notice that it's got this really cool inner nugget piece in it over here. Now, this inner nugget is quite large. It's way bigger than example would be the Power Core Inner Nugget that's in the Columbia series. We're calling this the Danger Zone Inner Nugget because it was inspired by that original Danger Zone Nugget that was in the balls in the early reactive era, late urethane era, in the late 90s, early 2000s in the Brunswick lineup. Now, of course, this is a totally different shape, but it's got a lot of length to it as opposed to being a spherical nugget. And the volume of this thing is high and the density is high. So what that's doing is it's dragging the RG down. It's also contributing a little bit to the differential of this core. And what that gives us the opportunity to do is use core shapes, now I'm talking about the body of the core, that is just a little higher in RG in terms of shape than we're actually getting as the resulting RG. This combat core, I should probably touch on the numbers, is effectively a 250, 051, 019 core. So that's 250 on the RG, that's squarely in the medium RG range for a medium revving ball motion. 051 is high but not maxed out on differential, that's going to be high flare potential. And 019, again, very high but not maxed out on intermediate diff as well, and that's going to shorten the hook window, meaning the transition from skid to hook to roll is more rapid, or the transition on the lane is more torquing when it encounters friction as opposed to a smooth motion. And you'll notice on the chart, of course, due to this combination of factors, this one is pinned pretty far to the sharp side of ball motion, and we'll talk about nuances of where they belong in just one second. But I do want to mention that this combination is a more medium RG than you're used to seeing for a pro performance ball. Typically these big asymmetrical balls with the strongest covers and the strongest cores play in the low RG range and rev up really early on the lane. But with our new cover stock advancements, we're playing in an RG range that is more medium for our strong balls, and for our weaker balls, we're starting to up the RG range just a little bit there too. You'll notice as an example, and this is an aside too, maybe I shouldn't get too far off the rails, but the Crown Victory, perfect example, that ball at a 254 RG is much higher and still performing really well, doesn't tend to miss the break point hardly at all unless you are highly rev challenged on the wrong conditions using that ball. But I digress. We wrapped this combat in a new additive package as well. So of course HK22 is the cover stock base, and I do emphasize that it is the base, meaning that all of these, even though they use HK22, it's not the same cover, because when you put an additive or a combination of additives in that base, you're really changing the formula. So the additives can, increase response to friction, increase continuation, change the length of the ball, the hook window, all sorts of nuanced things. This has cohesion in it, which is our traction enhancing additive that really helps the glue and the stick at the back of the lane. What I've noticed cohesion does more than any other additive is it helps the ball slow down in the mid lane without making it slow down in oil. So when you see HK22C, the C stands for cohesion, and that's really helping the ball slow down. When the ball slows down, it has a better opportunity to change directions. And Alpha Premier is a combination of new additives that we are debuting here at Brunswick, and what this is going to do for us is help the continuation of asymmetrical bowling balls. This one is in the sharp category of ball motion, but I think that if I were being super specific about where I was locating these, I would have this just one tick to the left of exactly where it is. It's not the sharpest asymmetrical ball that we manufacture, but where it is not quite as sharp, it is also a little more continuous. 19 intermediate differential is a lot of intermediate differential. When you get that much torque in the late mid lane, what you're left with typically is a ball that hook sets and gets a little bit forward through the pins. So Alpha Premier additive package helping increase the hook window of this ball a little bit for a little bit more utility, a little bit more usability, maybe a fraction less sharpness than some of the other HK22 cohesion balls, but with that trade-off, you also get a little more usability, user-friendliness, and continuation. So that's what I've got on combat. We're going to shift gears and look at Infinity Quest, and we'll talk about the nuances of this chart again, because this one is really sharp for a solid bowling ball. Of course, compounded finish, same as the combat, but I was actually debating back and forth between which one of these two belongs further right on the chart as the sharper ball. and they're sharp in different ways. So we'll talk about that in a second. But before we do, let's just refresh you real quick. The RG of the Infinity Quest 252, so that is just one tick higher, still playing in the medium range, but this is now on the high side of medium for RG. So very lightly later revving, but still medium revving in terms of how soon that ball revs up. 051 total differential is, funny enough, the exact same total differential as the combat, and that is not a mistake. These are built to complement each other. But the interesting thing here, remember, 19 points of intermediate differential in the combat, only 10 points of intermediate differential in this Infinity Quest. Now, 10 points of intermediate differential is just barely asymmetrical. So this one actually is more of what I call a bridge ball. It's going to bridge the motion between asymmetric and symmetrical balls, where it's not going to be the sharpest, most responsive ball you've ever seen off the friction. It's not just going to absolutely go dead nuts sideways. It's going to blend and continue just a little better on the back of the lane, but it's also going to be a little more like whippy, for lack of a better phrase, in its continuation, because it does have asymmetry. So sharper than a symmetrical ball, but not as sharp as your biggest high tier intermediate diff balls. Good balance. And because we can't use balance holes anymore in your layouts, this is again getting in the weeds, but lots of good little tidbits in this video. Because you can't use balance holes anymore, this is akin to having a built-in balance hole in a symmetrical ball, because what those balance holes used to do is spike the intermediate differential in a symmetrical ball. So now instead you can use a lightly asymmetrical ball, such as this Infinity Quest core, and you've got that ball motion that you're kind of missing. If you're not a pro shop operator, or you're not highly invested in layouts and the minutia of them, then forget I said anything. But just know that this one is a nice complement, and it's a nice step that bridges the gap between these high asymmetrical balls that are up here in the chart. I keep putting my hand like in the chart. The graphics aren't on the screen when I record, so you have to bear with me. A nice bridge between the high asymmetrical balls that have a lot of asymmetry and your smoother but still sharp by cover characteristic balls that are down here in the symmetrical category of ball motion. And one last thing before I get back to the chart here, this beautiful, wild-looking Infinity Quest. This cover, once again, the base, HK22, has cohesion, that's the C in HK22C, and it has the Evo Solid additive package. So we last saw this in the Mesmerize. So this is effectively the Mesmerize cover, polished with a different core. So that's where we're at, and we know that that cover stock was relatively continuous for being a big ball. It dug really early. Interestingly, this Infinity Quest being quite a bit cleaner, both being compounded but also having a noticeably higher RG. So you'll notice this one getting down the lane miles quicker, easier than that Mesmerize did. Okay, before this video gets like entirely out of control in terms of like runtime, let's get back to what we're talking about here. The last thing I want to mention is where they go in our arsenal building. So we've got our combat, that's going to be the heavy oil sharp ball, and you've got your Infinity Quest, that's going to be your medium oil sharp ball. So that's pretty easy in terms of where you slot them for arsenal building. But if you're looking at one ball to be on the sharp category of ball motion and you don't want too much overlap, or maybe you already have a sharp option, let's go through this a little bit. Obviously the combat is built to handle more oil volume. It's going to be a stronger mid lane read, it's going to be a stronger late mid lane change of direction, and I don't want to say like it's early mid lane, because it's not, it floats pretty well. Once it gets started, it's going to change direction with a sharper, more abrupt change of direction, and it's just going to be able to cover more boards overall on heavier oil conditions. Now you think that the solid would be the earlier diggier one, but that's not what the core characteristics are telling you. Infinity Quest is the slightly higher RG core, and it's also the slightly less intermediate differential core. So these finishes are the same, so you're kind of getting yourself in a same length window for that. But because it's a solid cover stock, it's not gonna be quite as jerky or responsive to friction as the Pearl cover stock is. It's gonna be a little more rounded and tame, but on top of that, the core characteristics also tell you that as well. The higher RG helps it down the lane a little further, and the less intermediate differential means it's gonna be a more gradual change of direction at the back of the lane. So I'm calling this, it's somewhere between flippy and hard archy. Now, because it's getting longer down the lane, a lot of people would think because it's making up ground on the back of the lane that this is actually the flippier ball. And that's where like the nuances of this chart make it difficult, and everyone has a lot of different opinions on like what ball motion is. Like, yes, the motion is happening further down lane. A lot of people would say, well, that's flippier, but it's going to be a more archy ball motion. So to me, it's actually less flippy, not more flippy, even if it is later. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that clears something up. And if that is more confusing and not less confusing, feel free to drop a comment. Like if you have any clarifying questions, I can definitely help answer those. So we spent a lot of time on this chart. I'm going to leave it right there. That's the information I have on the new Combat, the new Infinity Quest, how they stack up against all the rest of the balls in the current Brunswick lineup. And when I say current, I mean of the last year. And yeah, they're shaded a little more toward the sharp side of ball motion right now, but our covers are really good at changing direction at the back of the lane right now. So I think we have to take advantage. And I think for most players on most conditions, that's the most advantageous for getting more entry angle. And of course, you guys know more entry angle to the pocket means a higher carry percentage in terms of the number of pins you knock down. So yeah, we're shading them toward sharp balls, but that's because they're good and they hit. So if you have any questions about the Combat, the Infinity Quest, any ball in the current Brunswick lineup, feel free to drop a comment below. I'm happy to respond when I have time. And of course, we're right in the middle of this series right now. Next up, we're taking a look at the Columbia 300 lineup and the brand new Pulse. So make sure you like and subscribe to Bowling Buckosh on YouTube and Facebook, and check back in about 1 week. We will have the Pulse video live and we'll talk about the Columbia 300 and Arsenal building with Columbia then. Until next time, I'll see you in the next video.